Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card making tutorial. Today I'm creating a watercolor background for this beautiful magical mermaid. This is a really fun stamp set to work with. It has lots of images and lots of different options for coloring it in. The mermaid was part of an online course that I created with Stampin' Blends, and I have that ready to go. So now it needs a project. I'm going to create a oval shaped watercolor background. I'll start off by not die cutting, but by embossing the oval image into a piece of watercolor paper. As you can see, it did not cut away, but it just made the impression of the oval. Now what that's afforded me is the size and the look is already embossed down into the paper. It's a really easy guide. So I'll start my coloring by adding some tap water into the barrel of the aqua painter, and then I added some fluid or some water only inside the oval. Then with several different colors of stamp pad ink, I'm adding a gradient look. I start with a light shade and work my way into a darker shade of ink. I want the lighter colors to stay at the top of the oval and kind of have it fade down just like it would in the ocean. If you're closer to the surface of the water, it will be lighter colors. In between some of the layers, I definitely dry the paper because it helps me to be able to have the colors lay on top of each other instead of blend into one another. A few pieces of washi tape are really great to hold down my paper. As I get this paper more wet and worked on, it kind of has a tendency to warp a little bit. So in order to counteract that, just a little bit of washi tape is enough to hold it in place. Using the barrel of that aqua painter requires giving it a squeeze as the ink goes down onto the paper. I'm creating an interest of the background with the bubble stamp, and I'm heat embossing the sentiment that says "Have a magical birthday" with white embossing powder onto black cardstock. I'm going to cut this out with my scissors so that it doesn't take up too much space and cover up this beautiful watercolor, which I want the watercolor to really stand out on this project. So I'm using a ton of snail adhesive on the back of this because I could not find my tear and tape. Watercolor paper is very thick and requires a lot of adhesive to stay put, and I almost always attach it to some sort of a layer to help it stay down flat on my card project. I'll use some dimensionals to raise this new layer onto the card base, which is made of thick Whisper White cardstock. Now I'm able to take the mermaid and position everything in place. I had the idea that I would use this piece of fancy foil designer series acetate, but it just doesn't really work in my design that I'm seeing in my eye. I want to definitely keep it more clean and simple, so I chose to leave that off this time. I'll find another use for it, it's no problem. Attaching with liquid glue the sentiment and the mermaid. If you participated in my online class for Stampin' Blends, then you'll recognize this mermaid as one that we covered in class, and you watched me color it for the hair and the skin, and then for the animals for the fishtail. And then I took this image and I'm using it now in this project. So it's a nice way that I can cross over the two projects. Keeping this down with liquid glue is just enough to keep it in place. And then I've gotten some sparkly sequins from iridescent sequins and from the metallic sequins, as I wanted the one sequin up on top of the sentiment to be a lighter color than the other ones that were kind of a bluish. You know, just like the water's fading down in color as well. That's going to finish off this project. I'll be stamping on the inside with more of the Tranquil Tide and giving it that the seaweed look on the inside of the card. Thank you so much for joining me for this card project. If you click Show More underneath the video, then you'll see all of the links to my blog, the links to the products, and any more information. It's right there in the Show More section. All of the products today are available in my online store. Thanks again for joining me today. I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching the video. Have a good day!